The Taoiseach notoriously claimed that repeal was a quiet revolution. Anyone who roared themselves hoarse, marching for choice, knows it certainly was not a quiet revolution. But it is an unfinished revolution. It's very obvious from the response of the government to our bill that the political establishment haven't learned a whole lot from repeal. They should be taking the overwhelming vote for choice that the people gave us 5 years ago and running with it. But instead they're hiding behind the sops put into the heads of bill before the referendum, designed to appease the Catholic Church, designed to allow Conservative politicians to complete their so-called journeys and to appease what they thought were their own Conservative voters. Even now, 5 years on, when things have moved on even more, and the government has a report that very clearly says that the 3-day wait has to go, that criminalisation of doctors has to go, that women still cannot access abortions on health grounds, and that the 12-week limit is too restrictive. Even now, politicians in this Dáil are lagging way behind the people. We shouldn't be surprised. It took them 16 years to legislate for the X case. It took them 35 years to get the 8th Amendment out of the Constitution. And then when they finally did legislate for abortion, they put a completely unnecessary 3-day wait into the law just to make sure that every woman has to wait a little bit longer before accessing the care that they need, and the impact that has on accessibility of care. The review of the abortion legislation was delayed until the last possible moment, and then they delayed publishing it. Now they are delaying legislating for the review. It's the same old story. They don't want to go near the issue of abortion because they're afraid it might lose them votes. Well, let me warn the politicians in Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, the Green Party, the Independents and everyone else who clings to the fence on this issue. If you fail to support legislating on this before the next election, you will lose votes from the 2/3 of the population who supported repeal and the tens of thousands of young people who have qualified to vote in the last 5 years. Women and pregnant people have waited long enough for their basic right to bodily autonomy and their basic right to access the health care they need. We've seen with the rollback of Roe versus Wade in the US what can happen if rights once won are not defended, and a reactionary minority succeeds in rolling back progressive gains on equality. We must ensure that that never happens here. Who would have thought that only 8 years after the marriage equality referendum, we would be seeing a significant and horrifying rise in homophobic attacks? Who would have thought that 8 years after the Gender Recognition Act, mainstream media outlets will be exploiting transphobia for clickbait, and Fine Gael politicians will be scapegoating trans people to divert from the housing crisis? And who would have thought that 5 years after repeal, half of people faced with fatal fetal anomalies would still be forced to travel to England to access the care that they need? That women facing risks to their health after 12 weeks would still be forced to travel? And that women and girls would be forced over the 12-week limit by delays in accessing medical appointments? The Taoiseach notoriously claimed that repeal was a quiet revolution. Anyone who roared themselves hoarse, marching for choice, knows it certainly was not a quiet revolution. But it is an unfinished revolution, and we need now to finish the work of repeal, and never to forget that it was an active and very loud mass movement that forced a Conservative political establishment to act. If the government insists on kicking this legislation to touch, and opposition TDs here go along with it, then that movement is going to have to get active again, to defend, to extend abortion rights and to ensure that no pregnant person is left behind.